Prologue: Cold streets, quiet souls. The winter wind crawled through the streets of Harlem like a restless ghost, slipping between alleyways, rattling loose signs, and carrying with it echoes of conversations, laughter, pain, and secrets buried beneath years of struggle. Snow fell slowly from the dark sky, soft, delicate, almost gentle, but life in Harlem had never been gentle. The streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. The neon glow of diners and jazz clubs flickered like tired eyes refusing to close. Somewhere, a saxophone played behind a fog-clouded window, its mournful notes drifting into the night like a lonely confession. And under one dim street lamp near the corner of West 136th Street, a woman sat on the frozen ground. Her name was Rosie Carter. Her coat was thin, its fabric torn at the sleeves. Her shoes were worn through at the soles. Her hair clung to her face, damp from melting flakes. And in her arms, wrapped in a faded blanket, slept a little girl. Her daughter, 6 years old, too small for the weight of the world pressing down on her. The child shivered in her sleep, her breath forming tiny clouds in the air. Rosie tightened her hold, but her hands were numb. The cold crept into her bones like a silent thief. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. She hadn't slept properly in 3. She had nowhere left to go. Once, she worked as a maid in a small brownstone house. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, sweeping floors, washing clothes, preparing breakfast for people who barely remembered her name. But one morning, without warning, the door closed behind her. No explanation, just a whisper. "We don't need you anymore." And suddenly, everything she had built collapsed like a house of cards. No savings, no family nearby, no one willing to take in a woman with a child. Harlem was full of people, but loneliness lived everywhere. People passed by. Some looked. Most didn't. To them, she was just another cracked stone in the pavement of a city that swallowed the weak whole. Rosie lowered her head and whispered into her daughter's ear, "I'm here, baby. I'm here, just hold on." But even she didn't know how much longer she could hold on. Then, from the end of the street, footsteps. Slow, heavy, certain. Not the hurried steps of a man avoiding trouble, but the confident walk of someone who belonged to the night. A tall figure emerged from the darkness. A long coat, black hat, hands in his pockets. His presence didn't shout. It commanded. Every sound in the street seemed to quiet around him. Conversations fading, tension hanging in the air, not out of fear, but out of respect. Ellsworth, Bumpy Johnson, the king of Harlem. A man whose name was spoken in whispers in bars, in hallways, in prison cells, and behind courtroom doors. To some, he was a criminal. To others, a guardian of the forgotten. He stopped walking when he saw Rosie. He didn't look away. He didn't pretend not to see her, like the dozens of people who had passed her before. He simply stood there for a moment, watching. The wind blew between them. Snowflakes drifted softly through the light. Then he stepped closer. Rosie tightened her arms around her daughter, unsure whether to fear him or hope. Bumpy spoke in a voice calm and steady, a voice that didn't need to be loud to be powerful. "How long you been out here?" Rosie hesitated. No one had asked her that. No one had cared. Her lips trembled. Her voice cracked as she whispered, 3 days. Bumpy's eyes shifted toward the child. The girl's lips were pale, her fingers purple from the cold. Without saying a word, he removed his coat, heavy wool, warm, expensive, and gently wrapped it around the little girl. For a moment, Rosie was speechless. Somewhere behind him, one of his men spoke, a nervous voice trying to sound tough. "Boss, we should go. This ain't our concern." Bumpy turned slowly, his expression cold enough to freeze steel. "Everything in Harlem is my concern." Silence followed. The man lowered his head and stepped back. Bumpy knelt down, looking Rosie directly in the eyes. "What's your name?" "Oh, Rosie." "Rosie," he repeated softly. "You're not spending another night on this street. Not as long as I'm standing." Rosie's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from something deeper, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Bumpy didn't wait for Rosie to stand. He didn't lecture her. He didn't ask how she ended up there, or why, or whether she deserved help. He simply extended a hand, a steady hand, a hand that said, "Get up. You're not alone anymore." Rosie hesitated, then slowly placed her trembling fingers in his. His grip was firm but gentle, lifting her with the quiet strength of someone who'd spent his whole life carrying more than his own weight. The child stirred in her arms and let out a soft, tired whimper. Bumpy turned to the driver waiting by the curb. "Illinois, bring the car around." The man nodded and jogged toward a sleek black Cadillac parked at the corner. People on the block watched from windows, from stoops, from behind drawn curtains. Not out of curiosity, but out of understanding. When Bumpy Johnson stopped for someone, it meant something. As the car rolled up, Bumpy opened the back door himself. Not a gesture of wealth or authority, but of respect. Rosie hesitated again. No one had opened a door for her in years. She swallowed hard. "And Mr. Johnson, I don't got money. I don't got nobody to pay you back." Bumpy paused. Something almost like sadness flickered behind his eyes. "Rosie, Harlem ain't a place where we leave mothers on the street." Then, softer. "And I don't do favors for payment." She climbed in, carefully laying her daughter across the seat, tucking the coat around her. The warmth of the car heater felt unreal, almost like stepping into another world. Illinois glanced into the rearview mirror. "Where to, boss?" Bumpy thought for a moment, then nodded. "Hotel Teresa." Rosie's eyes widened. The Hotel Teresa wasn't just any hotel. It was Harlem's crown jewel, the Waldorf of Harlem. Muhammad Ali stayed there. Ella Fitzgerald. Leaders. Stars. People who mattered. People like Rosie never even walked through its lobby. Her lips trembled. I can't. That place is for. It's for people who need a roof." Bumpy interrupted calmly. "Tonight, that's you." The Cadillac pulled away from the curb, gliding through the quiet streets. Snowflakes streaked past the windows. The city lights blurred like fading memories. Rosie held her daughter close, tears finally slipping down her cheeks, not from fear, but from release. For the first time in days, she could breathe. Bumpy remained silent beside her, staring out the window. His presence filled the car, calm, unwavering, like a great stone that storms could break themselves against but never move. But inside, his mind was far away. Years earlier, he'd seen another woman standing in the cold. Only this time, he had arrived too late. The memory came back sharp and heavy. Another night, another winter, another woman on the street. Her name had been Evelyn Parker. Young, bright, a singer with a voice that could melt iron. Bumpy had known her from the clubs, always laughing, always humming, always talking about the day she'd make it big. But Harlem had a way of crushing dreams beneath rent receipts and empty refrigerators. Her husband had left. The club cut her pay. The bills piled up, and one day, no one noticed that Evelyn had stopped singing. By the time someone told Bumpy she'd lost her apartment, it had already been snowing for 2 nights. He found her under the fire escape behind Lenox Avenue, arms wrapped around a newborn baby, frozen silent, motionless against her chest. Her lips were blue, her eyes half open. The child didn't cry. Bumpy touched her shoulder, but she didn't move. For the rest of his life, that moment followed him like a shadow. Power couldn't bring her back. Money couldn't warm the child. Influence couldn't rewind time. He buried the baby himself, paid for the funeral, made sure Evelyn's name wasn't forgotten. But the guilt remained, a seed inside him that grew roots deeper than prison walls and alleyway corners. So whenever he saw a woman alone, a mother struggling, a child cold in the night, the memory rose like a burn inside his chest. He whispered to Evelyn's ghost, "Not again. Not while I'm still breathing." The Cadillac rolled to a stop outside the Hotel Teresa. Bumpy inhaled slowly and stepped back into the present. The lobby doors opened. Warmth, light, polished marble floors and brass railings that gleamed beneath soft chandeliers. Jazz played faintly from a radio behind the desk. The air smelled of tobacco, perfume, and expensive paper. The night clerk, a slim man in a neat suit, straightened when he saw who walked in. His voice wavered between respect and nerves. "Good evening, Mr. Johnson." Bumpy nodded toward Rosie. "She needs a room. Top floor. 2 beds. Fresh sheets. Hot water." The clerk didn't argue, didn't ask questions, didn't judge. He simply reached for the ledger. "Yes, sir." Rosie's knees felt weak. Her voice shook. "Please, I don't want to cause trouble." The clerk looked at her gently. "Ma'am, you're not causing trouble. You're checking in." The words almost broke her. A bellhop appeared and guided them toward the elevator. Rosie cradled her daughter, watching the golden doors close, rising higher and higher above the city that had buried her 1 hour earlier. When the door to the room opened, she froze. Warm light, thick blankets, a real mattress, curtains that softly framed the snowy skyline outside, a bathroom with steam rolling out from a freshly drawn bath. Her daughter's tiny fingers twitched, clinging to the warmth. Rosie pressed her forehead to the child's hair, and finally sobbed. Bumpy stood at the doorway, not intruding, not hovering, just witnessing. Then, slowly, another presence filled the room. A soft voice, firm but gentle, warm as a fire on a winter night. "Rosie, you're safe now." Rosie turned. Standing beside Bumpy was Mayme Johnson, Bumpy's wife. Graceful, elegant, dignified, dressed not like royalty, but like strength wearing silk. Her eyes weren't cold like Harlem legends sometimes described her. They were kind and wise. She approached Rosie and knelt beside the bed. "Let me help you get the little one into the bath. I'll make you some tea." Rosie blinked. You don't even know me." Mayme smiled softly. "That never mattered to me." Together, they undressed the child carefully, easing her into warm water, rubbing life back into her limbs. The girl breathed deeper, color returning to her cheeks like sunrise touching snow. Rosie watched in disbelief. For years, she'd been invisible. Tonight, someone saw her. Bumpy lingered at the doorway, hat in his hands, shoulders heavy. Mayme glanced back at him, a look passing between them. A conversation without words. A promise kept. A burden shared. When the child was wrapped in blankets and sleeping peacefully, Mayme turned back to Rosie. "Rest now. Tomorrow we'll talk. Tonight you heal." Rosie nodded weakly and drifted into sleep, the first real sleep she'd had in months. Bumpy closed the door softly behind them. The hallway was quiet. He exhaled, not with relief, but with determination, because helping someone once wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a debt, and Harlem never forgets a debt. Word travels fast in Harlem. By morning, whispers flowed through barber shops and diners like smoke. Bumpy took in a homeless woman last night. He paid for the Teresa, whole floor if he had to. He wrapped the kid in his own coat. But while Harlem admired compassion, others saw it as opportunity. Across town, in a polished corner office filled with cheap cigars and expensive hypocrisy, a man leaned back in his leather chair and listened to the story with a smirk. Councilman Richard Hale, a politician with a smile like broken glass. He'd built his campaign on cleaning up Harlem, which really meant raising rents, destroying neighborhoods, pushing families into the streets, so his friends could build luxury towers on their homes. Rosie had been one of his casualties. Her building? Sold to developers. Her eviction notice? Signed by his office. Cheap ink. Permanent consequences. So when he heard Bumpy Johnson had stepped in, he didn't see kindness. He saw defiance. "The last thing I need," he muttered, "is that man turning charity cases into symbols." He stubbed out his cigar. "If Bumpy keeps rescuing people I force out, my leverage disappears." He glanced at his aide. "Find out who she is, where she worked, what strings we can pull." "Yes, sir." Because in Harlem, kindness threatened power, and powerful men don't tolerate threats, even if the threat was a mother and her child. The corridor outside the interrogation room hummed with the faint, rhythmic buzz of fluorescent lights. Detectives drifted in and out like ghosts, murmuring to one another in clipped, tired voices. Somewhere down the hall, a typewriter clacked with mechanical insistence, the sound of paperwork building a case the department desperately wanted to close. Inside, Bumpy Johnson sat alone. The steel chair beneath him was cold, unforgiving. His hands rested calmly on the table, fingers steepled, his breathing slow and controlled. He looked like a man waiting for a meeting, not a suspect waiting for judgment. His fedora sat on the corner of the table, its brim shadowing the reflection of his face in the dull chrome surface. The door creaked open. Detective Harris stepped inside, a paper cup of stale coffee in his hand. His partner, O'Rourke, lingered by the door, arms crossed, eyes full of suspicion and something else, resentment. Harris sat down across from Bumpy and slid a manila file across the table. "Ellsworth Johnson," he said quietly, "you've got a way of being in the wrong place at the wrong time." Bumpy smiled faintly. "I've been hearing that since Harlem was cobblestones." Harris flipped open the file. Crime scene photos. Statements. A map of Little Italy with a red circle around the alley. He didn't push them toward Bumpy. He just let them sit there, heavy like a confession. "You were seen," Harris said, standing over a man who'd been shot twice in the chest. "Witness says you didn't look surprised." Bumpy tilted his head. "Who's the witness?" Harris ignored the question. "You didn't run. You didn't shout for help. You just stood there." Bumpy leaned back, eyes calm. "You sound like you already wrote the ending." Harris sighed. "Help me understand why you were there." Bumpy paused, a long, deliberate silence. Then he looked Harris dead in the eye. "I was there because someone wanted me to be." O'Rourke's jaw tightened. Harris frowned. "Meaning?" Bumpy rested his palms on the table. "Meaning the man who died wasn't there for me. He was there because someone set the table and wanted to see who showed up for dinner." Harris studied him. For a brief moment, the buzzing lights seemed louder. Then, the door burst open. A uniformed officer leaned in, breathless. "Detective Harris, Captain wants you." "Now." Harris stood. O'Rourke followed. The door shut. The hallway erupted into movement. Phones rang. Radios crackled. Somewhere, footsteps pounded like thunder across the tile floor. Bumpy exhaled slowly. He knew that rhythm. The rhythm of escalation. He had seen it in Harlem, Chicago, Philly. It was the sound of war choosing where to begin. The door opened again, but this time, it wasn't Harris. Agent Whitaker stepped inside. FBI. Immaculate suit. Cold eyes. A man who treated conversation like chess. He closed the door softly and took the chair across from Bumpy, hands folded neatly on the table. "Mr. Johnson," he said in a calm, almost warm tone. "We finally meet." Bumpy's face didn't change. "You boys are stacking the room tonight." Whitaker smiled thinly. "New York is complicated. And when complicated things happen, certain departments take an interest." Bumpy stayed silent. Whitaker leaned in. "The man who died tonight, his name is Anthony Rizzo. Low-level courier. Connected, but not important." "Everybody's important to somebody," Bumpy replied. Whitaker's eyes flickered. "That's a generous philosophy for a man in your position." He opened a small notebook. "We know what tonight was," he said. "And so do you. This wasn't business. This was signaling." Bumpy didn't blink. Whitaker studied him like a chessboard. "There are people," he continued, "who don't like balance. People who don't like Harlem standing on its own. People who resent the fact that you negotiate instead of bleed." He closed the notebook gently. "And they want to drag you into a war." The silence that followed was heavy. Bumpy's jaw tightened by a fraction. "Who?" he said, a word more like stone than sound. Whitaker smiled without warmth. "That," he replied, "is why you're still breathing." He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked to the door. He paused, hand on the handle. "One last thing," he said without turning. "If you step wrong, even once, there are people in this building who won't ask questions before they pull the trigger." The door clicked shut. Bumpy inhaled slowly, then exhaled. For the first time since stepping into the station, his eyes hardened. He wasn't thinking about the alley anymore. He wasn't thinking about Rizzo. He was thinking about Claudia and the look on her face when she opened the door earlier that night. The fear she tried to bury. The silence she couldn't explain. Someone had walked too close to his home. Too close to his wife. Too close to the line he never let anyone cross. Outside the station, the city glowed under pale streetlights. Snow drifted down in lazy spirals, settling into the cracks of sidewalks and the seams of rooftops. The night felt quiet, but not peaceful. Harlem breathed differently when trouble was walking. Bumpy stepped into the street, collar turned up against the cold. A black sedan idled by the curb. One of his men leaned across the seat and pushed the door open. "Boss," he said softly. "Where to?" Bumpy slid in. "Sugar Hill," he said. The car rolled through the city, past diners still open at 3 a.m., past alleys where kids with tired eyes warmed their hands over barrel fires, past storefront churches whose doors never truly closed. Harlem wasn't just streets and buildings. It was heartbeat, memory, territory, a living thing he had sworn to protect. They pulled up outside his brownstone. The lights inside were on. Claudia sat on the couch, a robe wrapped tight around her shoulders, hands clasped in her lap. Her eyes were tired, but steady. Bumpy closed the door behind him. He didn't speak. He simply walked forward and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Tell me," he said quietly. She hesitated. Then the truth came out. Slowly, carefully, like glass being lowered onto stone. A man had approached her earlier that day. Not a thug, not a junkie, Not someone sloppy or desperate. He was calm, clean, too polite. He asked questions he already knew the answers to. He smiled too much. And when she tried to walk away, he put his hand on her arm. Just enough pressure to say I could hurt you. Just enough to say this is a message. Bumpy's hands tightened around hers. What did he say? Claudia swallowed. He said, tell your husband the ground is shifting, and some men don't like where he's standing. Silence filled the room. Deep, sharp, suffocating. Bumpy stood slowly. His face was stone. Go upstairs, he said gently. Get some sleep. She hesitated. Bumpy, don't. He kissed her forehead. I won't start anything, he said. He waited until he heard the bedroom door close upstairs. Then he walked to the phone. Dialed. A voice answered on the second ring. Yeah. Get everybody, Bumpy said quietly. We're meeting. Now. The city didn't sleep that night. Word traveled fast, through back rooms, pool halls, barber shops still sweeping up hair after midnight. Men who moved in shadows came out of them. Engines started. Doors locked. Cigarettes burned down to trembling filters. The meeting spot was an old jazz club on 139th, closed for renovations, lights off, stage empty. The room smelled like dust and saxophone brass. Tables were scattered like bones. They arrived one by one. Chin, Junebug, Nate, Slim Charles. Men who had stood beside Bumpy when Harlem almost fell apart a decade earlier. Men who knew what loyalty meant when the streets turned red. Bumpy stood at the center of the room. No theatrics, no speeches, just truth. Somebody laid a body at my feet tonight, he said. And earlier, somebody put a hand on my wife. Every head in the room lifted. The air changed, thicker now, charged like the seconds before lightning strikes. That wasn't about money, Bumpy continued. Wasn't about corners. It was disrespect. It was bait. He let the words sink in. Somebody wants a war. They want Harlem out in the streets, so they can walk in afterward and claim what's left. Slim exhaled slowly. Who you think it is? Bumpy's gaze hardened. I don't think, he said. I know. He walked to a dusty table and placed a photograph on it. Salvatore Marino. A man who smiled like a knife. A man who believed diplomacy was weakness. A man who had been waiting for years to see Harlem drown so he could sell the lifeline. He sent the message, Bumpy said. And now he's waiting to see how we answer. The room fell silent. Thunder without sound. Chin cracked his knuckles. So what's the move? Bumpy looked at each of them in turn. We don't give him what he wants, he said. No chaos. No streets on fire. We don't swing wild. We cut precise. He leaned forward. We take his leverage, one piece at a time. We make him realize something. Nate raised a brow. What's that? Bumpy's voice dropped to a whisper, steady, dangerous, unshakable. That Harlem isn't prey. He straightened. And neither is my family. The men nodded. The plan began. Quiet. Measured. Unavoidable. Because in Harlem, power didn't scream. It moved. And when it moved, the city felt it. The night swallowed Harlem in a deep, uneasy quiet. Snow drifted over rooftops like falling ash, settling on fire escapes and street signs, softening the city without ever truly calming it. Tonight, Harlem didn't sleep, it held its breath. Across the river, on the edge of Brooklyn's industrial docks, a warehouse stood alone beneath the glow of flickering sodium lamps. Trucks sat idle. Chains hung from steel beams like frozen serpents. The water beyond the pier slapped against the pylons in slow, heavy rhythm. Inside, Salvatore Marino waited. He sat at a folding table in the center of the concrete floor, a cigarette burning between his fingers. Two men stood behind him, muscle, silent and watchful. A faint echo drifted every time one of them shifted their weight. The cold crept up through the concrete into their bones. Marino checked his watch. He's not coming, one of the men muttered. Marino smirked, a small, amused curl of his lip. Oh, he's coming, he said quietly. A man like Bumpy Johnson doesn't run from the table. He flips it. The warehouse door groaned. Footsteps echoed. Bumpy Johnson stepped into the light. Long coat. Calm eyes. A man who carried storms inside him. Two of his men flanked him, but they didn't move ahead, and they didn't fall back. They stopped several paces behind him, as if respecting a ritual older than either side of the city. Bumpy walked forward until he stood across from Marino. Neither spoke. For a moment, only the wind outside existed. Then Marino exhaled a laugh. Well, he said softly, Harlem's king himself. I'm nobody's king, Bumpy replied. I'm a caretaker. Marino raised a brow. Of what? Bumpy looked him dead in the eye. Of people who don't have anyone else. The words landed like a weight. Marino leaned back in his chair. Let's not pretend this is moral philosophy, he said. This is business. You built something, but you built it on ground you don't own. And men like me. He tapped Ash onto the floor. We don't like balance that doesn't belong to us. Bumpy's jaw tightened. You put your hand on my wife, he said quietly. The room froze. Marino's eyes flickered, just slightly. A message, he replied. Nothing more. A nudge. Bumpy leaned forward. There is no such thing, he said, voice suddenly sharp and steel, as a small disrespect to the people I love. Silence. The tension throbbed like a living thing. Marino's smile faded. You're making this emotional, he said. An emotion gets men buried. Bumpy didn't blink. So does arrogance. He straightened, his voice low, measured. You think Harlem is a loose house waiting to collapse. You think if you scare me, I'll panic. If you corner me, I'll bite wild. That's the mistake men like you always make. He stepped closer. You think force is power. Marino's fingers tightened around his cigarette. And what do you think power is? Bumpy's eyes darkened, not with rage, but with absolute conviction. Discipline, he said. Patience. Knowing when not to burn a city down. The warehouse swallowed the words. Bumpy's men remained still. Marino's men shifted uneasily. Bumpy nodded toward the far wall. A door opened. Two figures were escorted inside. Marino's eyes widened. His nephew. His courier. The only leverage Marino thought he controlled. Their hands were untied. They walked, freely, to Bumpy's side. No bruises. No fear. Just stunned silence. Bumpy didn't look at them. He kept his eyes on Marino. You sent men into Harlem, he said. I could have answered with blood. I didn't. I sent a message back. He pointed gently at the two men. They walked my streets tonight, and nothing happened to them. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Marino swallowed. His voice came out quieter than he intended. That you're merciful? Bumpy shook his head. That I control my streets. No shouting. No threats. Just truth. Pure. Immovable. Bumpy stepped even closer, his voice barely above a whisper. The kind men leaned forward to hear. You wanted chaos. You wanted Harlem screaming so you could walk in afterward like a savior. But Harlem isn't screaming because I didn't let it. He paused. And that means something. The warehouse seemed smaller now. The walls closer. The air heavier. Marino stared at him. Not as a rival, but as a man staring down a truth he'd never considered. Bumpy straightened. This ends tonight, he said. You don't touch my people. You don't walk my blocks. You don't whisper my wife's name. You stay south of the river and pretend Harlem doesn't exist. Marino's jaw clenched. And if I don't? Bumpy's answer was almost gentle. Then we stop being careful. The words carried more threat than any shouted warning ever could. The two men stood there, not gangsters, not rivals. Kings of two worlds that could not coexist. Finally, Marino exhaled. Slow. Resigned. He nodded once. No handshake. No theatrics. Just acknowledgement. A man accepting that territory was not taken tonight. It was earned. Bumpy turned and walked toward the door. Snow blew in from the pier, swirling around him as he stepped back into the night. His men followed. Behind him, the warehouse lights dimmed like the last flicker of a dying fire. The city breathed again. Hours later, dawn crept over Harlem in soft gold hues, brushing across rooftops and waking the streets with quiet warmth. The night's tension slowly dissolved into morning sunlight. Bumpy stood on his brownstone steps, coffee in hand. The world sounded simple again. Distant traffic, a radio playing jazz from an open window, a neighbor sweeping snow from his stoop. Claudia stepped beside him. He didn't tell her the details. He didn't have to. She saw it in his eyes. The storm had passed. For now, she slipped her hand into his. You're home, she whispered. Bumpy looked out over Harlem. The streets, the people, the pulse of a community that moved because he made sure it could. I always am, he said softly. Because Harlem wasn't just where he lived. It was who he was. And as long as he stood, Harlem stood with him.